Hello everybody and welcome to episode 1 of the new and improved 2021 edition of Hot Takes. My name is TJ, and even though week to week I will be joined by Sottle, this week I actually have a guest star in place of Sottle who's going to be arguing some hot takes against me. It's none other than Derek Brown. Derek, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to keep up a long-standing tradition of being wrong in every aspect, and I hope I won't let Soul's legacy down.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're aware of how the show works, or at least how the show finishes. But for those at home who don't know how the show works, Derek and I will reveal some hot takes that we have not seen. Derek will then argue his side of the hot take, and I will be forced to have the more difficult job of providing a rebuttal. And at the end of the day, I'll probably win, because that's just me. I'm just great. But we'll see. Maybe Derek will have better luck than Sottle has had over the past year. And of course, we do have a 60-second time limit, but this year we don't even have anybody who can time us. So, Derek, we're going to go on the honor system, if you would, please.
I mean, based on previous recordings, TJ, I will say that you will not stick to that, but I, as an honorable person, will try my best.
What are you talking about? I'm great on the honor system.
Yeah.
This is my show. I wouldn't taint it by taking too long on my takes. All right, whatever, Derek. It's time to get into it. If you would, let's go ahead and reveal hot take number 1. The new GMs this season will perform better than the rest of the field.
Well, TJ, I got to say for this one, I could not agree more. For too long amongst the established GMs, there's been a certain amount of apathy, I will say, and not a willingness to get down and dirty and practice out those matchups, grind them out, and make sure that they are fully equipped no matter what the metagame will bring. But these newcomers, the new blood, are hungry for competition. They're going to be absolutely dominating the rest of the field. I think you can no longer rest on your laurels with the core set coming in. It requires an entirely new set of skills, and I think these newer players, especially in APAC, I'm thinking Lambie series, Give Please performing incredibly well so far. It's going to be difficult for the old and washed up GMs to keep up.
Derek, you cast Asia Pacific, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who won Asia Pacific this past week?
It was Alutemu this week.
Is Alutemu a new GM?
Not exactly. He's new-ish.
Okay, you cast a little bit of Europe this week too, right?
I did cast a little bit.
Who won Europe Grandmasters this past
I think
week?
it was Tice.
He's definitely not a new GM. And I'm sure you at least watched Americas a little bit.
No one watches America's TJ.
All right, fair point. But No Hands Gamer won, and even though he's somewhat new, he's really not new. So that's 3 for 3 across 3 regions. Not a single new GM won their region. So, Derek, who knows the future, right? This show's not about speculation. It's about cold, hard facts. And right now, the cold, hard facts tell us that new GMs are not performing better than old GMs.
I mean, you're not wrong there, but I think we can agree this week, for the most part, was a bit of a trip to the circus. With Lunacy Mage being the premier deck, I really don't think we got to see too much of the skills of our new players tested, but with the recently announced nerfs, maybe I think we'll start to see the dust settle, the nerves of our new players will be well and truly settled, and they'll be in gear, ready to perform better.
All right, hot take number 2. Well, speaking of, you mentioned Deck of Lunacy. It was lunacy not to ban lunacy this weekend. I'm guessing it means it was crazy not to ban Mage with Deck of Lunacy this last weekend. What do you think?
This one is just true. I know I was maybe a little bit hasty to go in on the last one, but if you watched any of Asia Pacific, you will see that I think 4 out of the 5 times we saw it in the first couple of days, it was top-decked onto Deck of Lunacy into the most disgusting games of Hearthstone I've ever seen. Even in the other regions where Tice got a reverse sweep against Yala where he was on the Mage, he got the worst draws I think I've ever seen in a series of Hearthstone with that Mage. It's just on average insane to not ban this Deck of Lunacy. The Hunter strategies, garbage. The Warlock strategies to get rid of Mage, it sometimes works, but if they're playing the Grand Slam 3 times in a game, you're still not going to beat that. It is purely insane. It was the best deck last week by a country mile.
Well, while I do agree that Lunacy on 2 was like almost unbeatable for any player. Pretty much every time we saw Lunacy on 2, I think that player won. There might have been one time, and it was because there was a Lunacy on 1 for the other player, right? It was pretty insane. There were players that were having success with a leave mage up strategy, and No Hands Gamer was one of them, right? He was on true. He was on a banned paladin strategy the entire tournament, and he ended up winning Americas. And yes, there was a couple games where he got Lunacy on 2 and just absolutely demolished. But I think that a lot of players were trying to focus on like beating the other decks and saying, you know what, I'm just gonna lose to Mage, I don't care, and I'm just gonna beat up on all the other decks in the format, like Rogue and whatever bad deck players were bringing for their fourth deck, right?
Yeah.
So,
how'd that go for them?
Well, they did lose to the Mage. So that part of their plan worked, because their plan was just to lose to the Mage and then beat the other decks. And I think that worked out pretty well overall, right?
That still falls under the definition of lunacy. If your strategy is just to say, okay, they've got the best deck against my lineup, oh well, it's Conquest. Let's just take an L and start the series 0-1. Pure lunacy. I won't hear anything to the otherwise. I think it will still be good next week, and we might have to have this discussion again.
All right, because you said these things with such conviction, I'm going to award myself a point because I think my argument was better, but I'm also going to award you a point.
Your argument was nothing.
Just because of your passion for the topic, So, good job, Derek. You've earned your first point on Hot Takes. So it's not an easy task.
I'm starting to understand why Subtle comes away from these in such a bad mood, TJ.
You're crazy. He loves this show. All right, let's go to hot take number 3. Warrior and Shaman still won't see play this weekend after the nerfs.
Okay. All right. I think I'm finally going to have to disagree, TJ, with one of these hot takes. This one, I think it's close around the line. I'm not especially certain on this one, but I do think with things shaking up, Penflingers disappearing from next week's lineup, you would have to guess, with them only targeting minions now. I think there's a lot of room for some of the other strategies to come into play. Shaman, obviously, we're thinking some kind of aggro decks could have a good place in the metagame. If these other tempo decks aren't quite so prevalent, you have the ability to get on the board a little quicker, so I think aggro Shaman could have some place, but Warrior is really where I'm putting my hopes into it. There have been a lot of lists knocking about that have come close to getting to the point where they're being playable. There's a lot of powerful cards in Warrior overall. I just think it's struggled to keep up with value with some of the other control decks and struggled to outlast the damage that these burst decks can come through with. But now that Paladin, Rogue have lost their Penflingers, Mage has lost a lot of its bite as well, Warrior can easily out-armor the burn damage that Mage can throw through with just the Fireballs and a Pexus Blast. So I think Warrior is in a very good spot to potentially see a bit of niche play this weekend.
Okay, so again, this hot take is it's under protest right now because it's against the spirit. It's hard for me to argue with cold hard facts when we haven't had a chance to test these balance changes yet. But I will say that Secret Paladin without Librams is still a very strong deck even after the nerfs. And that was, I think, one of the decks that could keep these two decks in check. I think that honestly, the out of the top 3 classes, even though they will be slightly lower in power level, with slight tweaks, right? They still are tier 1, maybe high tier 2 decks. They're still going to be viable rogue archetypes. They're still going to be a viable paladin archetype. And Mage, I think you just jam the same 30.
Agreed.
Except you just get the Lunacy on 4 instead of on 2, and you miss out on 3 cards, and maybe your Refreshing Springwater comes a little bit later. But still think it's very powerful. So
yep.
I think time will tell. And again, I think it's too much speculation because even though 200 IQ. I have this massive brain. You know, that's why I don't have any hair, because my brain's too big. The hair just pops right out. But since, again, a lot of speculation going on with that one, I think we'll have to go with a bonus hot take. Do-do-do-do-do. I need the game show sound effects. Bonus hot take. Boop, 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 boop. All right. The bonus hot take number 4. Players who don't play meta decks should be encouraged.
I don't exactly know what this hot take means. Like, by their mum, who thinks they're a very special individual? Like, yes, absolutely. Encourage their creativity. By other players who want them to win? I'm going to have to say no. There's a reason why meta decks are the meta decks. Like, it depends how far down the ladder we want to go. Like, if you're playing a tier 3 deck that has a niche counter queue, like, I don't know, some of these Warlock decks that have been knocking around, maybe they're like tier 2 decks, but they have a solid place in the metagame to like counteract the priests and the mages, arguably. But strictly non-meta decks that are just these wacky homebrews, you know, it's Grandmasters. It's the tier 1 of competition. The point is that it is players competing at the absolute best, and you know, you have to run pretty far down before you're not playing meta decks. And no, they should not be encouraged. Friends don't let friends play Hunter in GM.
Derek. How will anybody ever learn to get an edge and beat the meta if they're not playing non-meta decks? I think there were many players this weekend who were successful who, while maybe they played some meta decks, they other decks in their lineup were not meta, and in fact were specifically anti-meta. Obviously, you know, Lorinda and I during the broadcast this weekend talked up Fled a lot. Who was a player that went completely against the meta, right? He didn't bring Mage or Paladin.
Yeah.
And he did quite well.
He did high roll 2 series. You're not wrong, TJ.
And in the series that he lost, he got high rolled. So, you know, at the end of the day, it balances itself out. And I think that I wish this hot take was not every player who doesn't play meta decks should be encouraged, right? I think that there should be like 20% of players that should be encouraged to not play meta decks, because then that gives the players that are playing meta decks, it keeps them on their toes, right? Which is important because it involves the league as a whole. Because there's players that are challenging the meta decks, and the players that are playing the meta decks are being challenged and forced to try and adapt and prepare. We all win.
Sure. I mean, the problem with this question, though, is the word encouraged. Like, over a large enough sample size, it's a meritocracy. If you bring a good lineup, even if it's off meta, then that is good. It's whether or not, it doesn't matter whether you should be encouraged or not. If you have the best strategy, then you will win and you will be rewarded for doing that. You shouldn't be encouraged to bring these garbage decks that don't do anything. You should just do what you think is the best. And if it works out, then, I mean, it works out, I guess.
And Derek, because you're so smart, I will award you the point for that hot take. But because Sottle wasn't able to make it today, and because I chose you as the replacement for hot takes today, and because you did so well on hot takes, I'm going to award myself a bonus point for choosing you to be on hot takes today. So that makes the final score 3-2 in this first episode of 2021 for hot takes. So thanks for playing, Derek, but TJ wins again.
Damn. Hopefully next time I'll be terrible enough to the point where I can win. We can only hope, I guess.
We can only hope. But that's going to do it for the first episode of Hot Takes. You guys can check out all the information about Hearthstone Grandmasters as well as upcoming Masters tours at playhearthstone.com/esports.